what kind of
Mhm.
experiences were they? Like, what did you dream about?
I saw thousands and thousands of children in front of me that were going hungry, and it was really upsetting. I had no idea how difficult that was for these children living with that food insecurity. And then when I woke up, I need to do something about this. But then when I had a second dream where I saw the same children again, I felt this guilt that I hadn't done anything about it and that these children were still going hungry. And it was really that second dream that spurred me on.
Welcome back to the OpenEd podcast. I'm your sometimes host, Ella, and today I'm joined by Kerry. Kerry is a very, very fascinating individual, and today we're going to be diving into her story. She recently published a book, and she has this really incredible journey of feeding hungry children. We talk about all the things about what it looks like to have a kid that's really passionate about doing something and about making change, like she was whenever she was younger, and how that's evolved into her story today. Also, how she involves her kids in things like mission driven oriented type of things. So, welcome to the podcast, Kerry.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so first off, of course, let's plug your book. What is it called?
It's called The Gift of Charity, Wrapped in a Korowai of Love, and it's by Kerry Owen and Lisa Knowlton. Yeah, it can be found on Amazon. It can be found on Cedar Fort Publishers, and it can be found at Deseret Books.
Very, very cool. So, okay, I gave a little bit of a sneak peek about your story, what you've done, the incredible work that you have put your life into, but let's get into it. So you mentioned earlier that you were always like a very mission driven person, right? Like whenever you were younger, you had this idea, you were like, I want to change the world in some way. And I think that there are definitely kids out there that are very, very passionate. Um, can you explain to me what it was like growing up?
Yeah, so probably the main story that I feel like was the most significant was when I was watching a news piece of these children in Romania, and they were in an orphanage, and there was like six little toddlers in the same crib, and their diapers were dirty, they were crying, some were rocking back and forth, and they didn't have that love and attention. And it really troubled me, and I talked to my parents about wanting to do something about it. And so I ended up handwriting, because back in those days we didn't have a printer in the home, right? And so I hand wrote all these letters and popped it in each person's envelope box down the street, and then arranged to pick up food, canned food. And when I went door to door, I had hardly anything that was donated. And I remember crying a lot just because I was disappointed that I was living in an area where there was, a lot of wealth. And yet, this canned food that I was asking for was obviously no one thought it was important, or I'm not sure like what the reason was why people didn't donate. But it was just a turning point in my life where I was just like, why wouldn't they donate? Why wouldn't they care? And so that was I'd say, the first sort of project that I did as a young teen.
What happened after that? Like you said that you were frustrated that nobody cared.
Yeah, I did a second attempt as well, where I had a bit more success, and I found out about, or my parents found out about an agency that were actually driving medical supplies and food over to Romania to the orphanages. And I remember them coming to the door to collect the food that I had managed to, put together. And they were like really encouraging and, thankful. And they actually said, you'd be welcome to come with us. But I was young, and so that obviously wasn't going to happen. But I just remember thinking, like, oh, I would have loved to come, and come and, seeing these children and seeing what the need is. And yeah, so I think that was where my desire to help was really fueled. Yeah.
That's so interesting. And then, like, what happened afterwards that eventually got you started with like actual, making change happen as an adult? Or was there a period in between like the early years to now where you have, gotten to where like you took on different projects and missions as well?
So yeah, there was a few things. My parents heard about the Chernobyl disaster, which was a nuclear plant, that eventually spread into the foods in Chernobyl, and then children were getting cancer. And so our parents hosted some children from Chernobyl to come and stay for like a holiday vacation, and give them great experiences and good food without cancer. And so once I was married, we also, my husband and I, would have these kids come from Chernobyl. And so I think and when we were dating, my husband and I was talking about I would love to foster and adopt children. And so, I really hoped that I could make a difference in life. I never realized that I was going to end up forming like a charity. That came later. We actually moved from England to New Zealand. And it was there where I actually experienced a series of dreams. And these dreams opened my eyes to children that were going hungry in New Zealand. I had no idea. We were living on the North Shore, a lovely area. I didn't see any poverty. I didn't even know that there was anybody going hungry. But these dreams woke me up to that. And so then I ended up setting a charity and delivering food into schools.
Okay, we're back. So sorry about that. I do not know what happened. Okay, so as you were saying, the dreams that you had opened your eyes to children that were hungry. What kind of experiences were they? Like, what did you dream about?
So my first dream, so I had three young children of my own at the time. So I was busy, I was doing stuff, but I would always pray that I'd be able to help people and get opportunities to help people. But I never expected this dream. So in this dream, I saw thousands and thousands of children in front of me that were going hungry, and it was really upsetting in my dream because I had no idea, and how difficult that was for these children living with that food insecurity, and it just was very upsetting. And when I woke up, I was like, okay, I need to do something about this. But then the daylight comes and you're like, well, it was just a dream. And Kerry, you don't even know many people here, you've not long lived here. What do you think you can do about it? So I guess kind of like insecurities of am I able to do this? Am I good enough to be able to do this? All those sort of questions come into your mind. But then when I had a second dream where I saw the same children again, I felt this guilt. I felt this guilt that I hadn't done anything about it and that these children were still going hungry. And it was really that second dream that spurred me on. And from then on, I set up this charity, Feed the Need, and ended up delivering food into schools because back then New Zealand didn't have a system, a food system at school. So kids who did not come with a packed lunch, well, they would just go hungry. There were other charities that were doing things like granola bars, muesli bars. They'd have some bread in the freezer and at the schools and stuff. So it was kind of like emergency sort of snacks. But I wanted to give them proper food, like proper home cooked food that would be nutritious. And so that's where it began. And so ended up, we did a pilot in a school, and then that we had a lot of mistakes and a lot of problems with food and cooking and delivery and so on. But we learned a lot, and that was educational in a different way. And then we ended up doing 2 more schools, and then it's just kind of each year expanded and ended up building a big commercial kitchen within the Salvation Army building. And that was a great partnership because they're all about helping those in need. And so it was great. We were able to cook and, deliver from that building. And in fact, they lent us their delivery van when ours broke down. So it was great. It was just great having that community support with like-minded people.
What made it something that you said, okay, I'm actually going to do something about it? Because what it sounds like is that you had these two dreams, you had like a moment of extreme conviction, and then you're like, okay, I need to do something about this. And then you put like your effort and money and tears and blood and sweat and like all of these things into this project, right? While you had three
Yeah.
kids, while you were doing all
Mm.
these other things, that's really difficult, right? And so, what made you say, okay, I'm going to actually do this no matter how much it'll cost?
Yeah, I felt a responsibility for these children, and I think that was what the dreams gave me, this feeling of responsibility. It was like, I've tried to describe it in the past, but well, that feeling that I have for my children, the ones that came naturally and the ones we adopted, like it's like this feeling of like I would do anything for these children. They're my responsibility. I want them to succeed. I want them to have well-being and to be happy. And it was those same feelings that I had for all these children that I'd seen in my dream. They might not have been my actual children, but I felt this like pure, like motherly love for these children, and I could not do anything, if that makes sense.
That's really interesting. So, what did you do next? Whenever you decided, okay, I'm going to do something about this, I have to do something about this. Because I think that there are a lot of people, I was mentioning this
Mm-hmm.
before, right? There are a lot of people in the world, especially whenever you're young, right? There's this like idealism. You watch a movie about people that are hungry,
Yeah.
and you watch a movie about people that are struggling in some way, shape, or form, and your heart goes out to them, and you're like, what if I could be the person to do something about that? And then over time, you live and you go along your life, and it's just like, "Well, I don't know if that's gonna be me." And this dream called you out of that and said, "You know what? Yes, it is actually gonna be you," and you felt conviction around it. But how can parents help their children to foster the parts of them that like want to make change, that want to do something about the things that they see as, injustices or as just wrong things in the world that, you could solve or
Mm.
problems that they could solve?
I think, first of all, believe in your children and encourage those charitable thoughts, and see how you can help them. So going back to those Romanian orphans, my parents were very supportive. They reached out to the agency. They helped me do what I did. And I think that having that, like, that belief that, oh, yeah, that's a great idea, and this is how we can support you, I think is really important for children. I actually think that, well, this is my theory. I feel like most people have some ideas and thoughts come to their minds that they think, oh, I'd love to do something about this. But I think often it's our insecurities, I don't know, like things that kind of stop us and think, well, really, what can I do? Can I really make a difference? And I think I was lucky just because I had those dreams to kind of fall back on. So for the times where it got really hard, and it was really hard to juggle everything. And also it was like an emotional toll, especially when I'd meet with these children. And so, there were times where I thought, oof, this is hard. But thankfully I had the dreams to kind of go, okay, no, this is what I'm meant to be doing. And I don't think we all need to have dreams to be able to do something good in the world. I think if you just have that desire, that's enough. And I think as parents, we can help our children and give them opportunities. And so, so with my children, I will include them in the charity work. And so over here, I direct a charity called Reach Out Today, and we've been here 8 years. And so I'll take my kids along to events and things that we're doing. So, for example, we do these pop-up hair salons. I'm not a hairdresser, I'm not a hairstylist, but that was a request that we had from one of the schools, if we could do like a pop-up hair salon with hairstylists and volunteers, and give these children that need a little bit of TLC, an opportunity to have their hair washed with shampoo and warm water, and have a hairstylist give them the attention that they've never had before. And so, I've brought my kids along to help and, sweep up hair and, give out hair care kits and assemble hair care kits. And so my daughter has assembled a lot of kits food packs and hygiene packs and clothing packs and hair care kits and so on. So I feel like, and my daughter's got really excited. In fact, she's taken over. She feels like I'm not doing a good enough job putting these kits together. So I'm like, great, awesome, great. You take pride in that. And so, yeah, I think giving kids the opportunity helps them, open their eyes to the needs out there, and also gives them a sense of belief in themselves that they can make a difference. For example, one of the pop-up hair salons, our daughter was interacting with the younger children and they just adored her. And she was like really excited afterwards, just talking about these children. And so I feel like whatever age you are, you can make a difference.
I love that. That is so beautiful. As a mom, right, you're building
Mm-hmm.
charities, you're building a business, and you're trying to do all these things, and you're also doing open ed with your kids, right? You're also building their education. What is that like
Mm-hmm.
juggling it all? Is it quite difficult?
All my children attended public school, and it was just a few years back. Our youngest boy got scarlet fever and sepsis and ended up becoming very sick, and his immune was compromised. He had a lot of his body was impacted for a good 18 months afterwards from the sepsis. And so the hospital recommended that we do online school instead of in person school. So that's actually kind of what I guess forced me to look into online schooling. I'd never thought of ever doing it, I'll be honest. And so here we were in this situation where he needed to have online school, and and then my daughter, she was keen to try it too, and so that was kind of how we stepped into the whole open ed online schooling. And it does come with a juggle, when you're trying to do things, but also you're kind of aware of, your children need extra support like from you to help kind of guide them, make sure that they're attending their online classes or in-person classes and so forth. But actually, I've actually really enjoyed it. It's been kind of like each school year has been kind of exciting. We're like, okay, so what school trips are we going to be doing? What we could do this as part of school, and we can do that as part of school. And my kids always say, okay, when are we going to do our school trip this week? And so it's kind of like a nice opportunity to be able to like connect with them, and and then like have them come with me to go and visit a family in need, and have them come with me to different things and be able to do schoolwork and have that flexibility, if you get what I mean. So I've really enjoyed the flexibility of making sure that like we can do this at 2 p.m. instead, and having that flexibility has been really amazing. And with the charity work, you have to be flexible because, so for example, you might have a refugee family that's just arrived and they need this and they need that and whatnot. And so you don't always know what you need to be doing each day. So it can come as kind of like, okay, so there's this family whose house is burned down, they have nothing, where are they going to stay, so there's just, that's kind of how charity work is. You kind of, it's not always planned, if you get what I mean. It's just kind of like what comes and what the need is, and trying to deal with that need. And so having that flexibility with the schooling and having them sometimes join me is great. It's really good. I love it, actually.
Has it transformed your relationship with them to involve them, or did you always involve them in some respects? Because it sounds like this was your mission. You
Mm.
had those dreams. You were like, I'm building this. And then it seems like it's kind of cool to make this not just your mission, but our mission, like our family mission. The more
Mm.
that they get involved, it becomes something that they're bought into as well. And that when you have to go and serve somebody or go and do something for somebody, like they understand because it's a part of their mission as well. And they've been there and they've seen the people that you're helping. And yeah, I think that's really fascinating. And also, in another way, I would imagine, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but I would imagine that it actually makes it almost easier for you to be on call in some of these like crazy moments that you would not expect because you're with your kids a lot. Like
Yeah.
if they were
Yeah.
in a school setting, like it'd be harder because you're not with them during the day, and
Mhm.
then sometimes you need to be called off and you're not with them afterwards either. But it sounds like you get a lot of really great time with them as well.
Yeah, yeah, and it's been great because even our daughter, like not for this podcast, but like for other things, like I might be having like a radio interview and so on, and I'll say to my daughter, okay, just ask me some questions, let me practice. And she'll be asking me these questions, and she was just like, Mom, I don't think you should give that answer. I think you need to. So it's been quite funny because she's been my little critic. And, but it's great because like she'll give me advice and thoughts. And because our family know about everything, it's like great. You know, having a perspective from her age, you know, is great. And even like with this book that we wrote, it's taken years. And so when it was published, my youngest boy said, all of that typing resulted in that small book. So he'd known, like, while he's doing schoolwork, I'm typing away and stuff, and having meetings with Lisa. And he was thinking, all that work was, I mean, literally, this is the book. And he was just like, all that work for just that. And so that was kind of funny. So yeah, my kids all know everything. They know everything. They know about the books. They know about any, like, when I go out and do talks or speeches, they'll sometimes come along and listen to me. So one of my sons who's living in Orlando at the time, I actually sent him a book, and he said, yeah, it was great, but I knew all the stories anyway. So it was kind of like, oh, okay, I didn't need to send you the book then. But then, you know, my hope is that they'll also have those, that they'll be inspired to do something that I believe like everyone has a calling, and whatever that might be. It might be looking after the elderly, it might be looking after veterans, it might be looking after, I just feel like there's so many needs out there that if we all decided, okay, we're going to do something in this sphere, well then, you know, how much better the world could be. I do know that my second oldest son, he's 22, and I would sometimes, like, he would sometimes say, I don't want to come. And I'm like, well, I need you to come. I need you to help carry this food into this apartment or whatever. And this one time he was really like saying, I really don't want to come. And I said, well, I need you. And so he was kind of grumpy in the car. And this was a few years back. And then we got there, and this young mother with lots of little children were there, and they just adored him. Like, they were just like clambering all over him. They wanted to play colouring with him. You know, we came out of there, and I said, oh, you know, they loved you. And he was like, I know. He said, actually, that was pretty fun. So I think sometimes, I think all of us, I think it's just human nature, will sometimes think, oh, I'm too tired, or I don't want to, or, you know, and I am actually naturally an introvert. And so putting myself out there, you know, meeting people that I don't know, of different cultures and language and so forth, is, you know, it doesn't come naturally to me. But over the years, I've been able to learn, you know, how to interact, even if you don't have the language, you know. And hopefully my
Yeah.
kids watch that and see that, and hopefully it'll help them. Yeah.
Yeah, I love this. I heard a quote one point and it definitely resonated with me because it aligned with everything that I've ever experienced. Like anytime that you serve other people, anytime that, you know, something that's like quite dear to my heart is actually like older people. Like there's a lot of older people that feel overlooked and like they don't matter as much anymore because they can't offer the
Mm,
world as much. And there's
mm,
lots of underserved communities, people that are just overlooked and not given enough. But I heard this quote once and it was like, we think
mhm,
that they need us, but we actually need them. And it speaks to like the peace
mm.
of our hearts and like our souls and our minds that are fulfilled in a way by doing things for
Yeah.
other people. The experiences that you have, the moments that you have, like with your son, whenever he goes there and like he doesn't even know what he needs, but then he experiences this beautiful
Yeah.
thing and it like it speaks to a part of him that he didn't even know that, you know, he needed speaking to, which I think is so beautiful.
I was just going to say the book, you know, The Gift of Charity, is exactly touching on that point, because I kind of had this epiphany at the end of my journey with Feed the Need in New Zealand, was that, oh my goodness, this wasn't just a gift for the receiver. This was also a gift for the giver. And this has just been such a privilege. And I can get emotional about it. I always do, because I realize that, having all these interactions with all these different children and learning about different cultures and, having all this love for the people that we served has just enriched my life. And I'll never forget them. And I'll always be grateful for those experiences. So, yeah, you're right.
Wow, that's absolutely beautiful. You mentioned earlier before we started recording that part of the reason that you also wrote the book is because you see this next generation and these kids that we're raising, including your kids, as the next group of people to recognize unmet needs and to fulfill them, whether that
Mhm.
be,
Yeah.
their main career trajectory or whether that be like side projects that they take on. Can you speak to that a little bit and kind of like the whole world of service, of charity, of philanthropy? Like, what does it look like right now, being inside of it?
I think once you delve into the needs in your community, wherever you are, it's never ending. There is, so for example, in New Zealand, we were doing this food in schools, but then the communities would come in asking, saying, can you do something for our youth? We have youth that have been kicked out of school that are, getting into crime and so on. Can you do something for our youth? And we ended up doing a youth engagement program where these kids that had been kicked out of school, we employed in the kitchens where we were making food for those children going without. And it was amazing. It was amazing to see these youth who often themselves had gone hungry
Wow.
and it was just incredible because they actually felt they were part of something. They were part of something big. They were solving something in their community. And here they were, cooking this food, learning how to cook food en masse and being able to, be involved. We were in the kitchens with mayors and leaders of the land and, business leaders. And these, youth that had kind of been brushed off to the side and almost like forgotten because they were like a waste of space almost. And then here they were being valued. They were the ones leading these business leaders how to go about cooking this food and assembling them and taking them into the schools. And it was incredible to see the confidence that these young people gained just from that experience in the kitchen and being part of something good. And so I don't know if I've gone off course, but I really feel like seeing these young people who were actually really quite insecure. Some had been I remember one lad said he'd been in 17 foster homes. These kids were basically unwanted. And so to feel wanted, to feel part of something big, their confidence grew. And, they all went on to do good things. This one girl went off and volunteered in the hospital reading to terminally ill children. Others did. Others went off to further education, and it was just incredible to see that these youth, given an opportunity to go out and serve, despite themselves being broken, were able to do amazing things in the community, but also were able to kind of have that sense of worth. And so, seeing that, I feel like a lot of youth today could probably realize their sense of worth by getting into charity work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's weird that like we forget all about the things that are not in front of us, right? Um, like if you're not thinking, this is a funny example, but like if you're thinking about white cars because maybe you're thinking about buying a car, you're thinking about a very specific brand of car, like you'll start noticing them more. And I think the same is true about needs in your community. If you start asking the question, what are the needs inside of my
Mm-hmm.
community? You'll start noticing them more. Um, and I think what's interesting is like there's a lot of people today that are talking about like the need for purpose inside of young individuals. Like young individuals
Mm-hmm.
don't have enough purpose. And I think that part of that is I wonder actually if part of it is the fact that like we used to have really dedicated third spaces. We used to have like really, really connected communities. And so it made it a
Mm.
lot easier for us to see the needs of our community because we were around it a lot. It was in front of us. You'd be talking to people and there were people that always needed something. I wonder if that has a correlation. I'm not sure. But out of your in your experience, right? What does it look like once you start asking the question, okay, what does my community need? Like, where do you even begin? Where do you start? And then what do you start finding out?
So after I had those dreams back in New Zealand, I then started talking to people, trying to understand the situation, reaching out to principals in schools which were low decile. And so that's, I don't know if they have something like this here, I can't think, but a low decile would be kind of like an area with more poverty. And so once I started talking to teachers, principals, going into the schools and talking to them, it was evident that my dreams were actually, yeah, there's a lot of kids that are going hungry.
And out of
And
curiosity,
then obviously,
why did you start with schools?
so in my second dream, I actually saw myself cooking foods alongside a team of people, assembling these individual meals and watching as we went into schools. And so that's when I
Wow.
realized, oh, they don't have a food in school system. They don't have a subsidized food system here. It was actually the dreams that kind of opened my eyes to that. And then when I went and started talking to people at schools, it was truth. There was no subsidized food in school system. There was just emergency foods. And so yeah, so that's yeah, that's why I went into the schools. And so when we actually moved here, I did the same thing. I went into the schools. I kind of feel like you're often teachers are more aware of their student needs. Social workers, school counsellors are often dealing with not just the schooling, but also dealing with the emotional needs of children. And so that's where often there would be, that's where I'd often get the answers of what was going on in the world.
That's really interesting. In the book that Matt and Isaac just published, they have this like workshop where they go through needs, interests, and resources, and they kind of break it down into like what are all the things that are available to you right now? What are all the things that could possibly be available to you? What are the things in your local community, for example? So like what are the needs that you could serve in your local community? I think well from
Mm-hmm.
what you've said, what I'm understanding is like sometimes there are legitimate needs in your local community that you could definitely solve. Sometimes you can solve them from an entrepreneurial perspective, other times you can solve them from a charitable perspective. And maybe both of them have an entrepreneurial spirit, but like maybe you create a business versus maybe you create a nonprofit business or something like that, a for-profit business versus nonprofit. Something that's really interesting to me
Yeah.
though is you started with the question, who do I want to serve? And then you went to where they were, right? And so like I think you can take it in both directions now that you've shared your story. Like if a kid is really excited about a specific type of group or like maybe they watched a movie and it was like, wow, I feel for this very specific thing. You can also start with the question of like, okay, who do you want to serve? And then where can you go to learn more about them? So if you, for example, want to serve young kids
Yeah.
or adopted kids, like you can go to the places where people know and are intimately close with that as a challenge and all the things that are going on in that world and like just learning from those people even like as a kid saying okay, maybe right now I'm not ready to start a nonprofit, but maybe right now the way that I get involved, the way that I,
Yeah.
focus in on all the things that are available to me is actually just by asking questions and starting to create a landscape in my mind about like what is this world of, helping, for example, adopted children or hungry children or elderly
Mm-hmm.
individuals in the community. Like what is this all about? What are the gaps that need to be filled? And then maybe they're not ready to do it now, but maybe they're ready to do it in the future. And I feel like that's actually a really fascinating way to do it. It's just like, okay, parents, maybe your kid is like super hyper passionate. Maybe they're ready to go, but also maybe they're not. And maybe they're just ready to learn more and get more curious and get more interested in this community.
I love that. I really love that. Like, even if it was just starting the question, starting asking the questions, and just basically being able to like help open your child's mind to the needs out there. And, maybe it'll be something that jumps out to them maybe 5 or 10 years later that they might go, okay, back then this is something that kind of impacted me and opened my eyes. And so, yeah, I feel like if we can just have our kids asking the questions, not necessarily having to go out, make collections, put together kits and whatnot, but just asking those questions would be great. Yeah, I like
Yeah,
that.
just learning about it.
Well, just one of the things that I was thinking is that when we moved here, I wanted to understand about children in foster care and, like, could we do something to help these children that are in foster care, and then talking to why is there homelessness? Like, what can we do to prevent homelessness? And so all these kind of questions were coming into my mind. So then I went to DCFS, who deal with, child protection and so on. And so, yeah, just asking people. Then I went to like Utah Foster Care and all those organisations that are out there doing that. And, before I actually did anything of significance, it was asking those questions and just talking to them, trying to understand what the issues were. What could we do to prevent this or that? Or what can we do when a child does enter foster care or does reunite with their biological family? What can we do to help that transition? And so, yeah, I think it's just asking those questions will help guide you at this time or in the future.
I love that. And then something else that you do really beautifully is you bring your kids into it. So, something that's important to me in the future is like creating the culture that I want my family to embody, right? And like being the first example of that. So, if I want my kid to work out or eat healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we have to embody that first as parents, and then we can have that standard for our kid. Then we can say, "Hey, you should be doing this," right? Because kids learn a lot from what they see you do more than what you say. And also, it is really important for habit formation, right? Like if something becomes normal to a kid, it's a lot easier for them to maintain it throughout. How would you recommend that parents get involved in the needs of their community and bring their kids along? Because I think that is also something that I think like my parents did that pretty well every now and again, but I definitely think that there's room for improvement. And I mean, as I look forward to the future, it's like, okay, how do you get involved in a way that, for example, puts your kid, like you were saying about your son, in an uncomfortable position of, hey, I don't really want to do this right now, but you're going to do it because this is what we do as a family.
Yeah. I think you can go online. So, for example, Just Serve. I don't know if you've heard of that, but
I
people
have
can
not.
go online and look for. Okay, they can look for service opportunities on Just Serve, and so I'll have people coming to my door, and it can be whole families coming to donate. And so it could be like a kit for a child entering foster care, or it could be Christmas gifts for a child in DCFS. And so I love that some families do it as together, some youth groups do it together, and I love that communities are looking for ways to go out and serve. And I'm sure that there's plenty other websites that you can go to seek out ways that you can serve and involve your kids. But you could just, just simply wherever you're living in the world, you could go looking for local charities, local non-for-profits, and just asking what do they do and have they got any opportunities to, if you're wanting your kids to have that face-to-face interaction, just kind of go talking to different charities and seeing what you can do to help and how could I involve my kids? And so I do sometimes get that question, like, what can I do to involve my kid with your work with Reach Out today? And so, yeah, and so just kind of looking in your community of ways that you can involve your kids. And maybe you could start off with an easy one. For example, I'm sure a lot of charitable organisations like Reach Out Today and like Feed the Need in New Zealand, they always want donations like kits for like here we've got like all different kits, and so you could say to your children like, hey, this week we're going to assemble a kit for this reason, and this is why we should do it, and this is the impact it's going to have. In the book I talk about this 11-year-old girl that her whole summer she dedicates to raising money for Feed the Need. And she bakes food and sells it from her garage. And when we meet, she comes and she's almost sheepishly handing me over this money, saying, I wish it was more. And honestly, that to me, her donation was one of the most impactful to me, because I thought, here she is, an 11-year-old girl that sacrificed her summer because she wanted to help children that were going hungry. And so I asked this girl, I said, can you imagine? This money is actually going to give 40 whatnot children lunch. Can you imagine now looking out at these 40 children? Do you think they would think that this wasn't good enough? I think they'd be really grateful. I think they'd be really thankful to you. And she actually started having tears roll down her cheeks, because I feel like, I just feel like kids, like if you can help them realize that that little bit, is going to have a massive impact on the receiver. But also, like, I wanted her to know that she'd done a good thing. She'd done a really good thing. Not many 11-year-olds would sacrifice their summer to raise money for children that were going without. Yeah, just maybe like look at local charities, just seeing what the needs are, what you could do, how your kids could get involved. I do feel like, a lot nowadays, mental health issues, maybe too much screen time or whatnot, all these different theories. But I do feel like purpose is one of those things that helps your child feel like they've got a reason to be, and and they've got something to give the world. And so, I would love it if parents could just kind of encourage their children to look beyond themselves, look beyond their family, and see what they could do to impact. And often I'll get calls at Christmas time. Most people are really keen. Like, we get a lot of help during Christmas time, and I wish that would just keep going through the year. Because the need is still going after Christmas, but start wherever it is, start small, and then just gradually go from there, if that's helpful. I don't know.
No, that's so beautiful. And yeah, I think it's quite valuable to like reiterate the fact that, you know, as a parent, you don't know how much you need this, and then you start serving other people and you're like, wow, like, okay, wow. And then as a kid, you don't know you need it either, and then you start serving people. And while it is entirely taxing, like I've definitely been there where it takes an emotional toll on you and it is hard. But on the other side of it, it is so life-giving. I've
Yeah.
I've tried thinking and tried getting involved in different places, and it seems like the barriers to entry are pretty high sometimes. How would you recommend dealing with that? So like as a parent, if you're trying to get involved and you're trying to bring your kids places, right? But like there are a lot of places that don't necessarily make it super easy to just say, "Hey, we're going to come in for the weekend." It's like, "Okay, well you need to take these classes or you need to do all these things in order to make yourself prepared." And probably it's worth it to do that. But have you seen high barriers to entry too in certain areas, or would you disagree with that?
It was a little bit glitchy there, so I didn't quite
Oh
hear the
no, okay.
question, sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. Um so whenever it comes to like to doing service opportunities in your local area and finding them and getting
Mm-hmm.
your kids involved, right? I would guess, because I mean, sometimes whenever even I have tried to get involved in my local community, the barriers to entry are kind of high. It's like, hey, you need to do all these things before you can even get started. Um, how do you find those things that are really easy for a family? Because let's say that you're a family of, say, 6 or 7, right? Um, maybe it's possible that you could make this a part of your family fabric, right? Like you can continue to show up all the time, but it's probably more likely that, you want to pop in once every couple of months, maybe to different charities and help your kids to see different things. Is that feasible? Or is it more feasible to like dive into one specific thing to continue going there? Um, I don't know if you see that barriers to entry for volunteering is high or not.
I think because I'm sort of already in there,
Yep.
it's easy for me to get my kids involved, and I don't know if I have the answers for that, because I'm not quite sure I found it easy, but that I think is because like I've built relationships with different agencies and organizations and so on, and so it's easy for me to include my kids because I'm already in it. Yeah, I mean, I would probably what would I do if there wasn't? I mean, just like, so for example, one of my sons was working at this car wash place, and he was given some tips, and some friends of ours saw my son giving those tips to a homeless man, and my son never mentioned a word of it. And then later, these friends told us that, oh, we saw him giving his tips to this homeless man. And I'm like, he did? Oh, yay. So, and I kind of feel like maybe just in the moment, if there's a situation, if you see somebody that's begging, maybe just, if you've just been to the grocery store and I've literally done this, I've got a baguette in the back seat of my car, and then I can see this homeless person. I pass him the baguette through the window, and my kids are like, "Oh, Mom, seriously, you're embarrassing," sort of thing. But like, I think there's always like situations like that that you won't have time to necessarily plan for, but you think, okay, like I'd bought some like pastries for a friend's birthday, and I saw this person and I'm like, okay, they need the pastries more than my friend does for a birthday. So I apologized to my friend. I said, I did buy you some pastries, but on the way, they went to this, homeless person, and that friend was like, no, I love that. I love that. Like, I'm glad you did that. So I don't know, maybe like there's situations like that just spontaneously, just kind of, even if you haven't got anything to give, this is, I think, also important. Even if you don't have anything to give, you've got no baguette to hand through the window, you've got no cash or whatever, give them eye to eye contact. That person, that homeless person that stood on the corner with their sign, give them eye to eye contact. I sometimes just say, I'm so sorry, I don't have anything. And I smile. And I haven't ever spoken to them about that, but I really do feel like just being seen is important as well for these people that are going through what they're going through. And so, just being that example to your child is important. There was a story I actually wrote in another book, an experience that I had here where I saw this homeless man, and I was at an intersection. And then from the other direction, there was this car with these young 20-year-old young men who wound down their windows, and they started throwing their soda bottles and cans at this homeless man. And it was just I couldn't do anything about it. And it was a very emotional experience, and came home and just was crying about it to my kids. And I said, if you were ever to do anything like that, like, that would be awful. If their mums could have seen their sons doing that, I'm sure they would have been just mortified. And so even just sharing experiences. My son, who was able to drive, picked up his keys and went off looking for that homeless man because he wanted to do something to help him. And he ended up helping a refugee family and gave them dinner from McDonald's. So I think just also sharing stories with your kids, sometimes it's hard. Like, actually, one of the lessons we did was on slavery, through OpenEd, and it was hard for my youngest son to learn about it, and he didn't want to read about slavery. And I said to my son, I said, but this is part of history and we need to learn. If we don't learn about history, then how can the future be changed? And so sometimes it is hard to share those stories. I didn't want to share the story about the homeless man being thrown at and, hurt. But, it helps open their eyes that, oh, a lot of these people that are vulnerable are also marginalized. They're also demeaned. They're also not treated fairly. And so, just highlighting that, this homeless man was treated unfairly, and he didn't deserve that. He was already in a really difficult situation, and that just made him feel even worse.
It was really interesting, and I think speaks to the heart of, like, right, we're all people, we're all humans, and every single human has a soul, and every single human. And I mean, these are my beliefs for sure, but like, um I think recognizing that there's another quote. I'm a fan of quotes, but there's another quote by
Same.
a you're good. There's another quote by, like, I think it was a philosopher or somebody, um, and he was looking at somebody passing by who had worse circumstances than he, and he was like, um, his name was Philip, I think. He was like, "There goes Philip, other than circumstance, or other than like the the stroke of luck. Like I could have been that person if I was born in an entirely different situation, in an entirely different way. If things had gone very differently, like I could be that person. And I think that's a
Yeah.
good thing to remember, is that like the reason that these things matter is not because, like, well, the
Hmm.
reason that these things matter is because people matter, and it could have been any of us, right? Um
Yes.
and and if
100%.
it
Yeah.
and if it is any of us one day, like we've all heard crazy stories about, like, somebody, having a car accident and their life changing dramatically, or um just crazy things,
Yeah.
like you would want people to support you and help you. And I think that is really um valuable just to be reminded of. And I think something that, so initially I'd asked you the question about, like, okay, well, how do you get involved whenever the stakes are high? Like whenever it's a little bit harder to get involved and just stop by and say, okay, I'm gonna pop by. And I think part of that is, well, you mentioned things like create kits for people. Like really think through, okay, who do I want to serve? And then
Hmm.
think through, okay, what does this organization, or what do these people need
Hmm.
in order to do their job of the people to people kind of things better?
Hmm.
So you were saying kits. I bet there are a lot of things where you can support the people who support people. Um, that's if like you're going to, pick a
Hmm.
Saturday and you're going to do it once every couple of months, and that's it. But I think there's also another question of, like, okay, but do you actually want to get involved? Because it works out really, really well to get involved and deeply involved with one organization, and to say, okay, like this is our mission. Like this is what we're going to focus on. This is who we're going to get to know. And like maybe over time, right, you find other missions around you and you also do those things as well. But it actually is quite valuable to say, okay, this is what I'm going to dive into, and we're actually going to learn about this, and we're actually going to do this consistently, at whatever cadence we can maintain as a family. So I think there's part of it is like, yes, there are barriers to entry for just like dropping in and volunteering, but the other part of it is, well, how badly do you want to
Hmm.
volunteer? And like, it's probable that those barriers to entry are there for a reason. Um, so I think that's all such great advice and so many great thoughts for, I think, just families to think about whenever it comes to, okay, what kind of kids do you want to raise, right? We want happy and healthy kids, but we also want kids that are um productive members of society, that look at society and say, okay, what are the problems that I can help solve, and that find their
Hmm.
purpose, right? And like, I think it's interesting, but like most of the time purpose has to do with other people and the people around you and the way that things connect. So getting people more involved in the community is never bad.
Yeah. There was a school that did a project called To Walk in Their Shoes. And so, well, actually, it was a class in a school, and the teacher had asked the kids to learn about, for example, refugees coming from Afghanistan and refugees coming from, um, all the different countries. And it was awesome. We were able to go in, and I took some refugees with me into this class. And these kids knew their stuff. They had really delved in, they understood the culture, the foods, how hard it would be to adjust to a new land, and, their faith and so forth. And I was like quite emotional when I left, because I just thought, these kids, like, were incredible. They really had delved into that whole philosophy as like to walk in their shoes, and I just loved it. And these refugees felt like really like uplifted. I feel like you can give those people who feel like their situation is hopeless hope by just learning a bit about them and their struggle and how we could help them.
I love this. This has been so beautiful. It's very refreshing to talk with you and to hear your story and just to hear how much you care. I think something that is quite difficult in the world is just finding people who care. So thank you so, so, so very much.